The raid on Dartmouth occurred during Father Loutre's War on May 13, 1751, when a Mi'kmaq and Acadia militia from Chignecto, under the command of Acadian Joseph Broussard, raided Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, destroying the town and killing 20 British villagers and wounding British regulars. The town was protected by a blockhouse on Blackburn Hill with William Clapham's Rangers and British regulars from the 45th Regiment of Foot. This raid was one of 7 the Natives and Acadians would conduct against the town during the war. Historical context. Despite the British conquest of Acadia in 1710, Nova Scotia remained primarily occupied by Catholic Acadians and Mi'kmaq. To prevent the establishment of Protestant settlements in the region, Mi'kmaq raided the early British settlements of present-day Shelburne and Canso. A generation later, Father Loutre's War began when Edward Cornwallis arrived to establish Halifax with 13 transports on June 21, 1749. By unilaterally establishing Halifax, the British were violating earlier treaties with the Mi'kmaq, which were signed after Father Rail's War. Despite the British conquest of Acadia in 1710, Nova Scotia remained primarily occupied by Catholic Acadians and Mi'kmaq. By the time Cornwallis had arrived in Halifax, there was a long history of the Wabanaki Confederacy protecting the land by killing British civilians along the New England-Acadia border in Maine. The British quickly began to build other settlements to guard against Mi'kmaq, Acadian and French attacks on the new Protestant settlements. British fortifications were erected in Halifax, Bedford, Dartmouth, Lunenburg and Lawrencetown. There were numerous Mi'kmaq and Acadian raids on these villages, such as the raid on Dartmouth. There was a raid on those in the Dartmouth area in 1749. In response to the raids, Governor Edward Cornwallis offered a bounty on the head of every Mi'kmaq. The British military paid the Rangers the same rate per scalp as the French military paid the Mi'kmaq for British scalps. As well, to carry out this task, 2 companies of Rangers were raised, one led by Captain Francis Bartello and the other by Captain William Clapham. These 2 companies served alongside that of John Gorham's company. The 3 companies scoured the land around Halifax, looking for Mi'kmaq. In July 1750, the Mi'kmaq killed and scalped 7 men who were at work in Dartmouth. In August 1750, 353 people arrived on the ship Albany and began the town of Dartmouth. The town was laid out in the autumn of that year. The following month, on September 30, 1750, Dartmouth was attacked again by the Mi'kmaq and 5 more residents were killed. In October 1750, a group of about 8 men went out to take the diversion, and as they were fouling, they were attacked by the Indians, who took the whole prisoners, scalped with a large knife, which they were for that purpose, and threw him into the sea. In March 1751, the Mi'kmaq attacked on 2 more occasions, bringing the total number of raids to 6 in the previous 2 years. The raid. 3 months later, on May 13, 1751, before sunrise, Broussard led 60 Mi'kmaq and Acadians to attack Dartmouth again, in what would be known as the Dartmouth Massacre. The raiding party came down the Shubenacadie River from Chignecto. Broussard and the others killed 20 settlers and more were taken prisoner. They burned 36 homes. Captain William Clapham and 60 soldiers were on duty and fired from the blockhouse, which was located at the point overlooking Dartmouth Cove. The raiding party tortured and mutilated the sergeant and wounded 3 other soldiers. Captain Alexander Murray, along with about 40 soldiers, left Halifax in 3 vessels and tried to track them down for miles, but most of the raiding party had dispersed. The British reported they had killed 6 Mi'kmaq warriors, but were only able to retrieve 1 scalp that they took to Halifax. Those at a camp at Dartmouth Cove, led by John Wisdom, assisted the settlers. Upon returning to the camp the next day, they found the Mi'kmaq had also raided the camp and taken a prisoner. The Mi'kmaq scalped all the settlers. The British took what remained of the bodies to Halifax for burial in the old burying ground. Aftermath. The British retaliated by sending several armed companies to Chignecto. A few French defenders were killed and the dikes were breached. Hundreds of acres of crops were ruined, which was disastrous for the Acadians and the French troops. Immediately after the raid, a wooden palisade was erected around the town plot. Mi'kmaq and Acadian attacks continued throughout the French and Indian War, which ended 14 years after Dartmouth was first settled. After the initial raid, no new settlers were placed in Dartmouth again for the next 30 years. Of the 383 settlers who arrived in Dartmouth on the Alderney in August 1750, only half remained 2 years later. By the end of war, Dartmouth was only left with 78 settlers. Similar raids happened in response to the British founding of Lawrencetown and Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, such as the raid on Lunenburg.